Good evening, friends. This is CA Sagar Jaivan, and this meeting is being organized by Income Tax Appeals Group, which is actually a WhatsApp group. But the purpose of the group is to organize the meetings, and the name itself suggests that it is Income Tax Appeal Group. So we are expecting that the basic provisions of the Income Tax Act are known to everyone, and whenever we discuss the matters which are
Pampam,
you
इंडियन आइडल मध्ये कलर नहीं येणार आहे.
nature.
कलर जोहार.
समीर जी जरा आप म्यूट रहेंगे तो अच्छा रहेगा.
माझा हात नंबर सर.
सो समीर जी आपका म्यूट कर दीजिए और राजा फॉर दैट मैटर एवरीबॉडी शुड कीप देमसेल्व्स ऑन.
म्यूट है ना. हाँ म्यूट है ना.
So you are not on mute, Samir ji. Okay. So I was just trying to say that we discussed the points which are slightly controversial in nature. And from the last time itself, we discussed that, a live case can always be discussed apart from the subject which is being discussed. So we select a topic, first of all, somebody studies, and then he becomes the kind of a group leader or a facilitator. And this is different from normal lecture meeting, because here we have a discussion. People can stop, they can ask, they can tell the facilitator to explain the things again they have not understood, or if they want this to be explained in some different matter. Everything is allowed, and we are not, we do not want to rush through the topic so that we have to complete by certain time. Although this meeting will have a time of up to, let's say, 11 o'clock, but supposing if something is left out or something is not discussed, then we can always stop at that point of time and we can go to the next part kind of thing. So all the things are discussed threadbare and nothing is left out. So this is the speciality of the meeting. But still, at some point of time, if speaker is little fast than what you expect, and if you think that certain things have not been properly explained or you have to add something, you can excuse him and you can ask him to, you can ask for kind of an excuse, and you can ask him to explain, or if you want to add something, and whether it is right or wrong, because here it is a discussion. It's not that everybody has got the authority over the subject. Maybe that what you have heard might have been overruled at some other place, but fine, that can be discussed by somebody else. So unless and until you come out with your comments, naturally the others in the group will never be able to comment on that. So this time we have two speakers or two people. One is Advocate Kushiram, and after he completes it, let's say in the first 20 minutes or so, then our usual speaker or the person who had taken up this topic of taxation in India with respect to section 5, 6, 9 and 195. So part 1 was completed last time, so we'll take forward from wherever we had left last time. So this is a good addition, and you please let us know your views on this, the addition that we have done, that, we are also allowing somebody else other than the main speaker to, discuss some live case. And this live case, remember one thing, it's not necessary that it should be a Supreme Court or High Court or a tribunal case. It can be as simple as the CIT appeal case also. Because we are not going to get Vodafone case to be argued in the court of law, which is actually the current topic for today. Everywhere is talking about Vodafone. But our problems are different. Our problems are small problems. And we are right now interested in solving our small problems. And this meeting is going to definitely be helpful for those who are in the first 5 or 10 years of practice and actually wanting to go for the appeal practice. So everybody, every senior person, including Sate sir, Tikekar sir, so every senior person is ready to help. And whenever you call them, they are ready to help their professional colleagues. So this is the advantage, and you are requested to take that advantage. And Vishnuji is also there. He is also very active. Today he is not there because of some other meeting that he has. And we also upload this on the YouTube on a very regular basis. All the meetings till date have been already uploaded on the YouTube. So you can always watch them as per your leisure, but attending live has its own charm. Now, without wasting too much of time, I will request Advocate Kushiram to start sharing his screen. and he has got very interesting point which we'll discuss first, and then our members will comment on that. In case you have something to be clarified in between, you can always stop him, because we are not stopping anybody to stop the speaker in between. But at the same time, remember one thing, that if he's talking about a particular subject topic, so let that particular topic be completed, and then you can stop him. Okay, so that's the way we go about it. So let's start with, and I'm happy that Kushiram, there are so many others who have expressed interest that they want to speak for this 15-20 minute slot. So that will become our regular feature from now onwards. So please start, Advocate Kushiram. So screen. I am muting myself now.
Yes, Kagaj. Is it visible?
I request everybody to keep on a mute mode. Only when you want to speak, you can put on not only your audio, but you can also put on your video. So that becomes a very comfortable kind of environment. So I request everybody, whenever you want to speak, you also put on your video also. So it becomes a kind of a discussion. So we get a feeling that we are not talking to a computer, or we are not talking to a mobile phone, but we are talking to a person. So that is just a request. Okay, Kushiramji, your slide is visible. You can start.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. So, what we are discussing today is the issue related to land purchased by a company in name of one of the directors. And the issue is relevant for assessment year 16-17. So, as far as this assessment year is concerned, it is very important to understand why I am emphasizing the assessment year in this particular matter. So, basic facts of the case are, there is an agricultural land which has been acquired by a company. The purpose for which the agricultural land was acquired by a company was to extract the sand from that particular land, which was required for the purpose of constructing the road and installation of pressure plant. And as far as Maharashtra is concerned, we all know that every agricultural land cannot be held by a person except an individual who is a farmer. In this case, the director is one of the farmer, apart from other directors who are also the farmer and director of the company. The land was purchased by the company, and entire payment for the purpose of purchasing land was paid by company, but the same was routed through director's individual bank account. The payment was not directly made by company from its account to farmer. The payment was first routed from company's account to individual director, and on the same date, the payment was made to the farmer. Land was accordingly recorded in the books of accounts of the company since 2012. The land was purchased in 2012, and the company is regular in holding that particular land in the books of the company. Now this director, one of the director, purchased another land in the year under assessment. And when this land was purchased, there was a difference between the consideration paid by the director on behalf of company and the fair market value for the purpose of calculation of stamp duty.
Just a moment. Now, there are some people who are actually not on the mute mode, and that is actually creating a kind of a disturbance. So, Kushiramji, if you can mute all of them one by one.
Go to participants, mute all.
Yeah, I have done it.
All thing that can you go back a bit, because when you were explaining the facts, please, I'm muting myself, not to worry.
So in this particular year also, that director purchased another land, which was agricultural land, and the payment was made by company to director's bank account, and then particular payment from director's account was forwarded to farmer. And the consideration was somehow one of the half of the fair market value, which was considered for the purpose of payment of stamp duty. So when the assessment was being carried out in the name of director in his individual capacity, the question arises whether this particular land has to be in the hands of director or it has to be regarded as the land owned by the company. Assessing officer raised this issue by issuing a show cause notice. Since the title of the land is in the name of director, why the provisions of section 56(2)(7)(b) should not be invoked for this particular assessment year. So primarily, when we discussed this issue with assessing officer, and we told him that provisions of section 56(2)(7)(b) applies to an individual or HUF who receives in any previous year. Now this receives word is also important as far as the applicability of section 56(2)(7)(b) is concerned. It does not talk about the person who purchases a property or who holds the title of the property. When we say receiver of the property, impliedly means beneficial ownership of the property. So when we explained him this particular point, he said no. What I will say that if the issue being the company is purchasing that particular property through its director, then that particular agreement which has been executed by director with farmer should have mentioned this fact that this particular transaction is being entered into him by on behalf of company and not in his individual capacity. He further said that the name of company is missing either in the agreement, and only the name of the SSE is plainly appearing in the agreement as the purchaser. There was also an issue which we raised before assessing officer during the course of assessment proceeding, that we challenge that particular stamp duty valuation, and you refer this matter to departmental valuation officer under section 55A of the Act. Accepting our request, assessing officer referred the matter to DVO. And DVO, after verification of records and physical verification of land and registrar office, he made a report of difference in valuation, making it half from original difference. However, DVO didn't mention this fact that this particular land belongs to company and not to directors. So again, after receipt of this particular report of DVO, assessing officer again objected to this particular transaction and said that we have not taken any contention as far as issuance of DVO report is concerned in the name of the director and not in the name of the company. It also emphasized that since the company is into the nature of civil contractor and construction of road and bridges, why it would require agricultural land? Even though we have explained him that this land is bought by the company for the purpose of extraction of sand, which is used for the purpose of construction of roads and bridges. AO denied this contention also. And it made an addition of rupees, a sum which was a difference between a purchase consideration and a value derived by departmental valuation officer in its report. Now, one thing is very interesting in this case, as far as the provisions of Benami Property Transaction Act is concerned, this particular act also recognizes a holding of property in fiduciary capacity by a person on behalf of another person, such as trustee, partner, director, depository, etc. So, even though there is no clear-cut provision in Income Tax Act as far as ownership of property in the name of director is concerned, this particular act also is a central act, and somehow it also takes its leg from Income Tax Act also. And all the officers of this particular act are same as that of Income Tax Authority. So this particular provision has to be taken care of when we interpret the transaction of director and company as far as purchase of land is concerned and the provisions of Income Tax Act is concerned. So when we filed this particular matter before CIT appeal, and we had 2 hearings in this matter before CIT appeal, CIT appeal was also of the view that since the title of the land is held by the individual director, I am not going to give you any benefit as far as your contention regarding purchase of land on behalf of the company is concerned. So we tried to take some research on this point, and we come across with only one judgment which has been passed by Honorable Punjab and Haryana High Court in the case of Ram Kumar Duhan. And this particular judgment is exactly applicable in the state of Maharashtra itself, because this particular transaction was also in the case of company which has purchased land in the name of director in the state of Maharashtra. So similar issue was before the lower authorities and High Court that SSC, the individual director, was filing his return of income. AO had an information that the director had purchased immovable property in Maharashtra. Sale deed is executed in the name of the director. And that particular director is a person who is a director in a company along with 3 other directors. That company has a policy of purchasing the land in the name of directors in the status of farmer. And accordingly, one of the land was also transferred in the name of one of the directors. So in this case also, AO denied the benefit of giving the benefit of transaction being undertaken in the books of the company, even though the title of the land was held in the name of directors. The only difference in this case is this particular transaction is related to a sale of agricultural land after converting that land into non-agricultural land use, and the consideration was received in the hands of company. Company has shown capital gain, but AO denied giving benefit of this particular transaction in the books of company, and he assessed this particular transaction in the hand of director. The same contentions were raised by the SSC before AO, CIT appeal and IT18 High Court, and the same contention were made that as per the Maharashtra state laws, agricultural land cannot be acquired unless a person is an individual who is a farmer in the state of Maharashtra. In this case also, the stamp duty and registration fees was paid by the company. Land was held in the name of one of the director, but it was shown in the balance sheet of the company. Affidavit was also filed before the lower authorities to the effect that the transaction was without consideration and was for administrative reason, because the land has to be compulsorily held by an individual. There was an MOU between company and director also. And these kind of evidences were placed before the assessing officer that a bank statement which clearly fortified the fact that the payment was made by the companies was rooted in the books of account, and therefore benefit of this transaction has to be given to the company and not in the individual name of the director. And in this case, CIT appeal has accepted the contention of the SSC and deleted the addition. Then department went to IT80. IT80 also given the benefit of this particular transaction. And before High Court, since this matter was already decided on the basis of facts by lower authorities, High Court only given its observation that there is no question of law in this particular facts of the case. And since the issue has been decided by lower authorities by appreciation of evidence, and therefore no jurisdiction lies to this High Court to reappreciate the evidences, especially when there is no perversity is established in the order passed by Honorable Tribunal. So what we have researched is we could find only this judgment which could help our case, as far as the applicability of section 56(2)(7) is concerned for assessment year 16-17, because post assessment year 17-18, even companies has also been included where there is a difference in fair market value, that is stamp duty value, and consideration for the purchase and sale of the property. So as far as this AY is concerned, we are of a gut feeling that our case is very much covered with the facts of the case, and even this particular decision which has been given and rendered by Punjab and Haryana High Court. But let's see, CIT appeal, the old CIT appeal was reluctant to give any benefit, and there is a now change in incumbent. Let's see what is going to be happening in this new hearing. So with this was my experience as far as this issue is concerned. Now we are open to discussion for 5 minutes for this particular issue. If someone has some more inputs on this particular transaction, on particular facts of the case.
Kushiramji, there is only one question which I wanted to ask. Whether there was an MOU between company and the director?
There was no MOU. There was a resolution passed in the general body meeting of the company 6 years back. And that master resolution basis, companies used to acquiring many lands in the vicinity of the area where it undertakes the road construction activity. So there is a master resolution between passed by the shareholders of the meeting based on the fact that agricultural land cannot be held in the state of Maharashtra. So that particular resolution was filed before the assessing officer, but he denied giving benefit of that particular resolution.
So that resolution which you are talking about is an enabling resolution, right? So enabling resolution means that you can purchase, that is fine, but that how will you prove that enabling you have actually purchased the land with the use of this particular enabling provisions? You may make enabling provision and you actually do not purchase, or you have made the enabling provision resolution and maybe you have purchased 3 lands like that, but other lands were not purchased like that.
No, we have almost 256 land in the name of in the books of the company, and out of 256 land, all 256 lands are held by either of the directors. Some of the lands are acquired by some directors.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Do you pass a resolution every time you buy a land, or it's a blanket?
We have a master resolution passed in the general body meeting, and thereafter, whenever we purchase land in the name of director, we have a board meeting. We took this transaction approved by board, and then we make these payments in the account of director, and by thereby making payment to farmers.
Okay. Sir, one more thing. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Was there a reference of the resolution in the agreement?
No, there is no such reference.
So then how do you prove that it is not an individual purchase and it is for the purpose of the company?
No, what we are trying to emphasize is the payment has been made in the bank account of director, and on the second day that particular payment has been routed and paid to farmer. And
in that case, it could also, sorry. In that case, it could also be treated as a loan to the directors, na?
The AO is charging and taking a view of taking provisions of section 222E also. Okay, I will first treat this particular transaction as deemed dividend, and then I will charge this particular transaction in the name of director. He has done both in this case also, but the assessment here is dealing.
So there are few suggestions which I have. This decision seems to be very good. One, there are 2 decisions of Allahabad High Court in which, when the vehicle was purchased in the name of the director, depreciation was allowed. That is 326 ITR 182 and 235 ITR 158. Then that decision relies upon a Supreme Court decision in Podar Cement case, in which they have said they have tried to distinguish between a legal owner versus beneficial owner, and the Supreme Court has said that beneficial owner is entitled to depreciation. So what are the factors to be considered is whether there is a power of enjoyment that vests with the company, power of possession vests with the company, power to alienate vests with the company, and power to leave by will. That also the personal director doesn't have power to alienate by will. So this is the second decision. As you have rightly pointed out, the word received, the word used is received, and word received is not defined. So received has two connotations, whether it is an actual receipt versus constructive receipt.
Correct.
Please check decision of Supreme Court in 44 ITR 720. There they have said that whatever entries made in the books of account can be treated as received on that basis. So please
Yes.
check that 44 ITR
Yes, sir.
720. Then provisions of deemed receipt
Yes,
under
sir.
section 7 and 198. Just check that. The word is received. You distinguish that between receipt and delivery. So these are two different terms. And finally, I just got one decision of a Jaipur tribunal in Yogesh Maheshwari versus Deputy CIT 187 ITD 618, in which it has been held that if it is a rural agricultural land, then it is straight off outside the purview of section 56 to 7B.
Yes, sir.
So these are-
Kushiram ji,
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to, really speaking, ask one small thing, that as far as 56 to 7B is concerned, okay,
Yeah.
the question is whether it is without consideration. Okay. Now, here consideration is not defined under the Income Tax Act, and therefore you go to the Contract Act section 2 into bracket D,
Correct.
which talks about a consideration is something which can be in money or money's worth, and it is not necessary even a person who is abstaining from taking anything. In that particular case, it is to be considered. I think you should consider even Mumbai Tribunal in the case of Mr. Parvez Poonawala, where the person gave a consent not to contest a will, and accordingly he had received an amount of about 5 crores of rupees in the financial year 5-6. So assessment year 6-7, the tribunal held that this particular amount is not assessable because the element in 56.2 regarding consideration is not complied with. And I think in this particular case, a director is giving a consent to give this particular land or to the company as and when company wants it. I do not know how the resolution is taken, but if at all resolution is mentioning all these particular aspects, I think it will be, really speaking, useful reference that consideration is something which is lacking, is not there. There is a consideration. We normally get carried away that somebody should have paid the money, which is not so. Like I will tell you, in case of loan, which is carrying without interest, it has been mentioned that it is not necessary that, really speaking, interest should be the consideration. Mere promise to repay that loan is a consideration. And
Pramod,
therefore,
Pramod, but here he is taxing the difference between valuation report and the actual consideration. So we are not on that issue at all.
no,
Suppose the market value was 100 and the government valuer has valued at 80 and it has been purchased at 50. I think he is taxing difference between 80 and 50. Am I right, Kushiram ji?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes. So consideration is not in dispute. There is a consideration, but he is saying it is transfer for inadequate consideration.
but here the question of inadequacy does not arise.
No. If this section is applied to the company, they could have done protective assessment of the individual and they could have applied this to the company. Then it would have been a different story.
Because for that particular year, the question of, really speaking, inadequacy of the consideration was not there.
No, he purchased the land for inadequate consideration, right? The individual. Forget the transaction between him and the company. You keep company aside for a while. The department is saying transaction between him and the seller, and that there is an inadequate consideration.
Yeah, rightly said that the dispute which has been raised by assessing officer is not between the company and the director. The dispute has been raised by the assessing officer, the transaction between director and third party.
Third party, correct.
Okay.
Correct. So I think I feel you look at those Allahabad High Court where they have considered the Podar cement and beneficial ownership versus legal ownership and this rural agricultural land and the entry in the books of accounts of the company which acknowledges as a receipt. So a company has received the land by passing entries in its books of account.
And sir, one more thing is important in this case: the land which has been held, other land which has been held by the company, there is extraction of sand, there is a sale of sand. They have assessed that particular sand in the books of company, and now they are stating a contradictory stand that the land is held by the director.
That's what I'm saying. The power of enjoyment, power of position,
yes, power of enjoyment,
power to alienate, all those rights are with the company.
Yes.
So therefore, beneficial ownership based on Podar Cements is the company only.
Yes.
And therefore, this section should be applied to the company.
Yes.
At the most, if it is to be applied 56, it should be applied to the company and not to the.
The problem is that this particular section, this assessment here, does not allow assessing officer to make addition in the name of in the books of company.
Yeah, I understand, but that should be the line of argument.
Yeah, perfectly, sir. So should I end up with this discussion, Sagarji?
One small thing that earlier, when the partnership firm used to buy commercial vehicles in the name of the partners, that time depreciation was allowed.
That's what I gave Allahabad High Court.
Yeah.
Even
company also.
Yeah.
This
where partners.
ITR 182 and 235 ITR 158.
Yeah.
See, there were two grounds there that the registration certificate does not indicate ownership. But keep that argument aside for a while. The other argument is legal ownership versus beneficial ownership. Entire money paid by the company, the money, the vehicle used by the company, any income also from that received by the company. Therefore, company is the beneficial owner.
So here, one last question. The company, instead of making the payment directly to the farmer, they have made the payment to director and director has made the payment.
Yes.
Correct.
Does this make any difference? I mean, we are talking generally because this has happened in the past. Okay. So whatever the court are taking the stand, that is yet to be seen. But supposing if somebody wants to do this kind of a planning or this activity in future, so will this make any difference if or whether our case will become stronger if the payment is directly made by the company? Because the car and other examples which you are given, most probably all these payments were directly made by the partnership firms to the seller of the car. So here
I don't know whether that will go into Benami, because here Benami defines is that payment made by person A and the asset bought in the name of B. Here it is in a way good. The second one is whether there'll be violation in the hands of, suppose the department takes stand that the land is owned by the individual and then 269 SS violation or 269 T violation. So these things will also take into account.
Deepak ji and Kushiram ji, even I would say, really speaking, a giving of a loan to a director, I think section 185 and 186 of the Companies Act also will have to be looked into, because that is something which is also a hurdle under the Companies Act 2013. Earlier, private limited company, I do not know, the company is a private limited company here?
It's a private limited company.
Yeah, but then in that case, that planning is very dangerous because 185 and 186 bars loans to the directors, you know.
Yes.
And if you are giving a loan, then in that case, the interest has to be charged under 186 according to the treasury rates, you know. So you are going into some kind of a different tangent here by giving a loan and making that planning, you know. I'm not even on 222E, really speaking. This is because here the qualification will be coming from the auditors. You know? That's what.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sagarji?
Yeah, I think we can always discuss this on the group if at all if there is any point. Otherwise, we can proceed with our usual topic, which is being facilitated by CA Deepak Tikekar. Is there anyone who wants to add something to this very important point or the case which was raised by Kushiramji? If not, then I think Kushiramji, you can make me.
Sagar, I just have one question with regard
Yeah.
to the once you are showing this land in the company's books of accounts, whether there is a kind of a note or something which is mentioned in the audited notes, or
Yes,
the
yes. We have made a note in books of accounts and even in audit report that certain lands has been purchased by company and title is held in the name of directors.
okay, thanks. That's all.
Yeah.
That goes in favor of the assessee, isn't it?
We are agitating these issues, but neither you accepted this contention nor CIT is willing to take this contention. Let's see what tribunal is going to do in this matter.
Okay, okay. Okay.
Actually, I only hope that companies' articles of association and memorandum allows them to buy the land like this, agricultural land.
See,
Whether
the
they
nature
have
of, yes, the nature of business of the company is such that it cannot do a business of extracting sand without purchasing agricultural land.
okay.
But somebody told me that if all the directors of all the shareholders are farmers, then the company also can buy.
Pardon, sir?
If all the shareholders of the company are agriculturists or farmers, then the company
Yes.
you can buy land in the name of the company. Because I had one family in our Ratnagiri district.
Okay.
All the family property was thrown by all the members into a private limited company because they didn't want the land to be further bifurcated. So they transferred everything into the name of the company. And for example, if there are 4 brothers, each of them got shares worth say 1 lakh rupees each. And his share of 1 lakh will be split amongst his children. So the land doesn't get divided. The land remains in the company, whereas so the land was transferred in the name of the company because all the shareholders were farmers. Think about that because that will be easier
In
to.
our case, the Talati office and Tehsildar, they all are deriving benefit of this particular fact that all the shareholder and directors are the agriculturists. So allow us to buy these land in the name of company.
But it was allowed in my case, in that case. Yeah. So if that can happen, then all these problems could be addressed, will be solved.
Yeah, this we can also think it of.
Yeah.
Deepakji, perhaps you are more influential in Ratnagiri.
Yeah. No. This is probably you may be knowing Vadame family.
I understand. I thought as much.
They did that and it is working very well. I liked it because otherwise what happens if one of the legal heir wants to separate, then the land gets divided. They don't want to divide the land.
पहिल्यांदा पागडीचं करायचं तसंच.
But Deepakji, मला एक सांगा की if it is a HUF property, then still can you do that?
Yeah. They have done it. It's an interesting
HUF property.
No, it's an ancestral family property only, and in say for example.
No, but can you first of all transfer ancestral property like this?
They have done it, and for example, if I am one of the beneficiaries, I am getting those shares. I can transfer my shares to my legal heirs now. So I'm not depriving my children of that right.
No, if it is HUF property, what happens is by birth somebody becomes part of he becomes a co-partner. Now, in case of if you are transferring the property in the name of the company, if somebody is having the shares, doesn't mean that his shares are going to his son or daughter or whatever.
No, you can allot those shares.
But shares by nature can be transferred to anybody in the same existing shareholding pattern.
No, that shareholder technically holds it in his capacity as a Karta of his lower HUF.
Okay.
So he also, while making.
So on the share certificate, what will you write? On the share certificate?
Share certificate, you cannot mention HUF because it is not allowed. So the name of the individual is mentioned, but everybody knows that it is an ancestral property, and in the will it will go as per the succession law only to all the.
No, but ancestral property cannot be transferred through the will.
No, my share I can transfer, no?
Exactly. So that's where the difference comes in. You can transfer the shares, but actually ancestral property cannot be transferred to the will.
No. Here then the ancestral property gets converted into shares. once it is put into the company with the consent of all the family members and even lower level, it becomes property of the company, and you become one of the shareholders, and you transfer your shares as if you belong to that family. That you don't do. See, you should have in the will, you should be very clear that the shares in this company represent your ancestral property, and therefore that will go as per succession law, and your other property, the way you want to give, you can give it.
Interesting.
I think, Deepak, perhaps what Milind is trying to say is actually ki if HUF is having any minor, then in that particular case, there can be a difficulty in the transfer.
So there are, see, it's not, I understand there are difficulties, but for example, I have, suppose I am the shareholder, I have two sons, and if they themselves also have minor children, I have to ensure that my property, my shares in the private limited company will go to my both sons, and my both sons in turn will give to their children.
No, sir, what Deepak sir wants to highlight is the transaction which will be undertaken between the shareholder who is taking shares in the name of individual Karta, but that particular shares will be beneficially held by all the co-partners. And the number of shares and valuation of shares has to be made on the basis of what nature of property and quantum of property which has been transferred from HUF property to a company's property. So that particular transaction has to be structured in such a manner that the shareholding is not hit by introduction of that particular property in any other shareholder's capacity or the person who is contributing that particular HUF property into the company.
Being a rural agricultural land, when I transfer it to the company, the gain is tax-free, and in lieu of that, I allot shares.
Yeah.
So there is no taxation in the hands of
there is no taxation.
Taxation in the hands of the individuals or in the hands of HUF.
But that shareholding will be structured on that basis that the other shareholders are not affected by this particular transaction.
Correct.
But then shouldn't there be also an exclusive memorandum of understanding in addition to this this company, wherein the shares and the possible devolvement of the shares at a later date should be well defined?
Yes, that can be done. There could be shareholders agreement. And individual who is holding those shares knows very well that he is holding in his capacity as the Karta of his lower HUF.
And one more important thing, that every shareholder should have some consultant like Deepak Tikekar permanently available to him.
No, but I like that concept. That concept was good.
And Deepak, I liked another one thing is actually the Ratnagiri district seems to be quite aware about the lifting of the corporate wealth.
Yeah.
True. They lifted it very well. Actually.
Yeah. Without actually others knowing that.
No, but what Deepak is telling, the similar judgments are there in connection with this particular amounts which are transferred between the family members, private limited company and the family member, where the shareholders are only two. I think 56 was not attracted and all this. Anyway, that's on the sideline. Thank you. I think Deepak has a long way to go.
Yeah. Now let's stop this discussion. We have done enough of good discussion actually. Although at point of time we had slightly deviated, but it was nevertheless very interesting. So now I request Deepak ji to take over, and I request Kushiram to make me host so that I can start.
I have already made you host, huh?
Okay, great. Okay, so Deepak ji, you can start your.
Can you open that PPT?
Yeah, I will. Just a moment.
Just go to page 2 and then we'll go to direct page 19. First, let's go to page 2. So this is our starting point. So in the last meeting, we decided that the taxability of any income in India depends upon 4 factors: residential status of the recipient of the income, receipt of income in India, accrual or arisal of income in India, and provisions of double tax avoidance agreements, out of which the first 2, that is the residential status of the recipient of income and receipt of income in India, was discussed in detail. And now we come to accrual or arisal of income in India. Now, slide 19. Sorry, slide 19, correct. Now, section 9 has many subsections. So, subsection 911, it talks about any income which is accruing or arising or deemed to accrue or arise in India on account of A, business connection, B, property in India, C, capital asset in India. So we will discuss all of this one by one. So first one is 911, any income which is deemed to accrue or arise in India because a non-resident person has some business connection in India. So what is business connection? So what are the requirements of that? One, there should be business in India. Two, there should be connection between the assessee and that business. And three, the assessee must have earned either directly or indirectly through that connection. So generally, when there is an element of agency, then their business connection is established. So if there is a non-resident and if he has an agent in India, then that connection is established. Subsection 2 has been substituted by Finance Act 2018 with effect from 1st April 2019. And how the business connection, now it says that business connection will include any activity of any person acting on behalf of non-resident if the person in India he habitually concludes contracts on behalf of the non-resident person or habitually plays principal role in concluding the contracts on behalf of the non-resident for transfer of ownership or for granting of right to use property owned by the non-resident and or for provision of services by the non-resident. So for example, if there is a non-resident abroad and there is an agent in India, and if that agent in India sells goods on behalf of the non-resident and he concludes contracts on behalf of his non-resident, it will be deemed that there is a business connection and the income of the non-resident attributable to such activity shall be deemed to accrue or arise in India. Similarly, if there is a non-resident who is rendering services and if there is any person in India who either habitually concludes contract on behalf of the non-resident or plays a principal role. What is principal role will depend upon the facts of each case. That means there should be a major role, not a minor role. Just showing that there is a customer here does not mean there is a principal role. So if he plays a principal role in the concluding the contracts, then it will be deemed that that non-resident has a business connection in India and the income of the non-resident will be taxable in India. Explanation 2A regarding significant economic presence was brought in by Finance Act, but its implementation has been deferred to assessment year 22-23. So we will keep this for option till it is introduced. Next. Now we will discuss this slightly in detail. A new section, new explanation 3A has been added by Finance Act 2020. What it says is that if there is any advertisement which targets customers who reside in India or a customer who accesses advertisement through internet IP address located in India. So what do you mean by this? Say for example, there is a telecom, there is a suppose a channel, for example, Z channel. Z has some network in say Singapore, and if Z uploads its advertisements on that, and those advertisements are for promoting Indian products in India, then that income by way of advertisement will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. Similarly, if there is a company Google in Google Ireland, and if the Indian producers advertise on those Google platform through IP address in India, that income will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. Number 2, sale of data collected from a person who resides in India or from a person who uses IP address located in India. I'll give you, suppose there is an ad agency which is into hoardings. And for example, there is one company which knows how many vehicles travel from Tilak Bridge from Dadar East to Dadar West. They know that in a month, in a day, so many vehicles travel in one direction and so many vehicles travel in another direction. If this data is collected from the company in India and it is acquired by some company outside India and it is used, then any income derived by that non-resident company from this data which is collected from person in India will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. Point number 3 is sale of goods and services using data collected from person who resides in India or a person who uses IP address in India. Here now let us understand one thing. There is also an equalization levy, if all of you are aware. The equalization levy in case of advertisement is 6% and it is to be paid by the Indian advertiser. So for example, if I have to remit say 2 lakh of rupees to Google Ireland, I have to remit not only 2 lakhs, but I have to pay 6% equalization levy before I remit that money to Google Ireland. So if you do that, then whether section 9 and these two will apply. Section 10 subsection 50 has been introduced, which says that if in relation to any income, if equalization levy is paid, then income under that head will not be taxable. So then these provisions will not apply. Moment you pay equalization levy, your your income tax and 195 will not apply. However, if the advertisement is less than 1 lakh of rupees, then the equalization levy is not applicable, in which event section 9 will become applicable. There is equalization levy another for online sale of goods and services. Here, this equalization levy is to be paid by a non-resident person. That is 2%. And if the turnover of that non-resident entity from Indian operations is more than 2 crores. So here also, if equalization levy is paid by that non-resident, then again, section 9 will not come into picture and the TDS angle also will not come into picture because of section 10 subsection 50. Anybody, any query on this? Then we can
can I just make one small observation here?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Actually, most of these companies like Google and all, you don't actually make the payment. They just swipe the card or whatever. So many people forget to gross up the amount before making the equalization levy payment. So that one thing I have noticed in many clients' cases, they forget to gross up because Google wants 100 rupee, means they want 100 rupee. So if you have to pay 6%, then you have to gross up that 100 rupee and make the payment of equalization levy.
No. So there are two types of equalization levy. In respect of advertisement, it is your duty to pay.
Okay? Yeah, exactly. That's where you need to gross up. That's where you need to gross.
No. You pay them 100 rupees and I pay 6% equalization levy here. They don't pay. Whereas in case of online sale of goods and services, it is 2%. And then the company, say for example, Amazon, if you import any goods from Amazon USA, then Amazon has to pay 2%. So Amazon will add up. So equalization levy also, there are two angles. One is in case of advertisement where you have to pay, and another is in case of online supply of goods and services that the non-resident has to pay. So
no, what I mean is, let's say if you have to pay Google 100 rupees and you have to pay 6%. So do you just pay 6 rupees, or you say 100 rupees is equal to 106?
No, because you are paying. No, it is, you are not giving net. Na? You are not netting it out. So you pay 6 rupees on 100 directly. Equalization levy is 6% on the advertisement charges, which you are doing. You are not saying that 100 represents 106. You are not doing.
Okay.
You are not doing that.
Okay.
So one more question. You
Yeah.
said if equalization is levy is applied, then this section doesn't apply. Now,
No,
my
because
question.
section 1050 says that in respect of those transactions where equalization levy is paid, the income to that extent is tax-free or exempt under section 10 subsection 50.
Correct. So that is not an optional section. It is definitely levied. So then in that case, this would not be levied.
Yes, once you pay equalization levy, either you pay or the non-resident pays, then the income tax will not be applicable. Then section 9 will not be applicable.
Okay.
This equalization levy is not there in my slides. I noted it later on, so I said let me point it out. Next. Now we will see some of the decisions which are reported in this regard. So in this case, this Specialty Magazines was a company which was based in UK. There were advertising agents, or what they call advertisement concessionals in India. So they collected certain amount, and after retaining their commission, they remitted the entire amount abroad. So the question is whether the income of that advertisement charges will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. Here they said yes, it will be deemed to accrue or arise in India, but then they went into the Article 5 of double tax avoidance agreement between India and UK, and then they said that this the company in India was an independent status because its income from such activities from that UK company was not significant, was not more than 50%. So therefore they said that it is an independent status, and therefore the income of that UK entity will not be deemed to accrue or arise in India under double tax avoidance agreement, because the advertisement concession of that Indian company will not be deemed to be PE of that company, and the business profit will not be taxed in India. So therefore treaty will override section 9, and they said the TDS will not apply. Can there be business connection through a branch office? Now here this Aramco Overseas set up a branch here, and they were rendering only procurement support services to the company abroad. So the question is whether that explanation 1 clause B will apply. That explanation 1 talks about operations which are confined to purchase of goods in India for exports. So that clause will not apply because these are procurement support services and not per se purchase of goods for the purpose of exports. Therefore it is not covered by that clause B of section 911 explanation 1, and therefore the income will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. Business connection will include professional connections also. So this is in case of a lawyer, if you have this, the provisions of 911 will apply to professional connections also. At one point of time, there was the issue whether the commission paid by Indians to company outside India, would it be covered, would it be deemed to accrue or arise in India? There was a circular, CBDT circular till assessment year 7-8, and from 22/10/2009, that circular was withdrawn. So the effect of it is that under normal sections, section 9(1), the commission, if it is paid outside India, will be deemed to accrue or arise in India, unless you are able to say that there are some technical services involved and the commission falls not under 911 but under 917, or you are able to prove that in lieu of treaty, double tax treaty, the non-resident company does not have permanent establishment in India, and therefore it is not accrued, then it's not liable for TDS. But otherwise, normal commission will be liable for TDS.
Deepak,
yes.
Deepak, this particular circular number that of 1969, which is withdrawn.
Yeah.
I think circular number 2. What was the purpose behind this withdrawal, really speaking?
See, probably they are trying to distinguish between what type of commission agent. For example, if I'm exporting textile, then I'm purely a commission agent. But if suppose I'm exporting, say, a technical product like, say, uninterruptible power supply, and a party outside does installation and commissioning because it's a very technical project, then in that case, in my opinion, the amount paid to that outside party is not commission simpliciter, but it is
fees for technical services.
Yes, fees for technical services. Am I audible, Dhiren? Dhiren, am I audible? Dhiren has left a message that I'm not audible. Am I audible to everybody now?
Yeah.
Actually,
I think Mr. Dhiren is having a problem.
I think you're audible. I think there's no problem.
I think he has some problem for quite some time. He has been writing the messages again and again.
Okay. Next. Unless anybody has any questions on this.
So basically, a non-resident agent, if at all he's just doing a collection work outside India, then in that particular case, there should not be a problem because that is not really speaking of fees for technical services. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, for business connection, there should be some element of continuity. So if there should be some agent who is doing continuous work, if there are only few or isolated transactions, then those are not covered by business connection. Now we will see business connection via liaison office. Now liaison office and branch, there is a difference. In case of a branch, there is an income as well as expenditure in India, whereas in case of liaison office, there is only some staff is appointed here, and the salary and expenses of running that office are reimbursed by the parent company. So in case of a liaison office, if the liaison office does not enter into negotiations with the customers for import of goods by that customers in India from the principal, then there will be no business connection. But if the liaison office is very active and they say they enter into they have a major role in concluding contracts on behalf of the parent company, then even the liaison office could be treated as a business connection in India, and the income of the foreign company or a non-resident company which is attributable to that liaison office working would be liable to tax in India. Similarly, if there is a parent company and there is a subsidiary company, if the subsidiary company also takes a very active part in the execution of the contract of the parent company, then there could be a business connection through the medium of subsidiary. So these are all few of the decisions which I have cited for business connection.
Deepak, as far as liaison offices are concerned, RBI, when it gives a license, does it not put a restriction on the activities which is to be conducted by liaison office?
Yes, they cannot generate any income. But many times what happens, a liaison office is opened here and they go slightly overboard and they keep on negotiating with the Indian customers. Technically, they are supposed to tell make Indian customers aware that there is such and such foreign company and the transaction should happen between the Indian customer and the parent company. But so if all these orders if they are routed through the liaison office, then income tax department will definitely take a stand that there is a business connection.
So it is then treated like a permanent establishment.
Yes. The liaison office defined anywhere?
Liaison office, that is defined under FEMA, because when you set up any liaison office or a branch or a wholly owned subsidiary, all those guidelines are given by the Reserve Bank, RBI.
So primarily, it is not the form of the organization, but it is the activity that it undertakes on behalf of its foreign counterpart that is more important, because there are many subsidiary companies who actually may not be concluding the contract, or there are specifically for avoiding this taxation itself. The contracts are made in such a way that they specifically say that you will not conclude the contract, and every time you have to get back to us for getting any kind of an increase or decrease in the value or whatever which is mentioned otherwise in the brochures or general information which is available. So the form of organization actually is not that much important, but the activities that they undertake will be more important.
Correct. But liaison office general feeling is that it cannot become business connection. That is not true. One, and what you said is correct. So the transaction between the Indian entity and the foreign entity should be on principal to principal basis. It should not be that principal to agent basis. Then you have a good case.
Again, and when you mention agent, one has to also take into account that independent agents will not be covered by this.
Correct.
Region,
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So,
But that is
then,
because of treaty. That is because of the treaty. That is because of the treaty. Treaty override. So then we'll have to go to provisions of the treaty. What are the provisions in the treaty?
no, but in that subsection 1, which is inserted by Finance Act 20 with effect from 1/4/22, what they have done is that they have also mentioned, explaining what is independent agent and all those things are actually brought into the act.
Correct. Correct. So role of the person who's doing business in India is important, irrespective of form. Irrespective of form.
Irrespective of form.
General conception is that if there is a liaison office, then there is no business connection or there is no PE. I'm just clarifying that merely because it is a liaison office and it doesn't have income in India, that doesn't mean that income of the foreign company will not be taxed in India.
Correct, correct. And for the purpose of proving or otherwise, maybe the mail exchange between you and the foreign company will become very important to be preserved.
Correct.
How exactly, what is your relationship with the foreign company?
Correct.
Whether you are actually saying only on paper, whether you are not allowed to conclude the contract, but you are actually communicating with the Indian customer and you are actually concluding the contract or not. So that kind of evidence can also be asked for by the AO for the purpose of deciding whether you are actually acting in that manner.
That section goes one step ahead, not only concluding contract, but paying principal role in the concluding contracts also. So if you play a major role, so your role should not be, for example, you should not determine the price. Price determination, price fixation should be by the parent company only. See, if you fix up price, then it will become a major role, right?
Correct, correct. Absolutely. Okay, that was good.
Next. Now this case I will discuss. This we have discussed in short. Earlier, this is Asia Satellite Telecommunications. This was a Delhi High Court case. At that point of time, it was very interesting. There was a transponder which was based out of Singapore. The programs were uplinked by say Z from here on to Singapore. Singapore put it on the amplifier on the satellite, and those programs were watched by Indians as well as people residing abroad. So the question was merely because some of the customers viewing that program belong to India, whether the income of that will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. The Delhi High Court said no. Then the government amended, introduced section explanation 5 to section 916, and that too they did it with retrospective effect from 1st June 1976 by Finance Act, that this decision, to nullify this decision. I think today there are a lot of news items, especially pertaining to Vodafone. We will come to Vodafone decision also in short in the next few slides. And the government is saying that that will not be retrospective prior to 2012. But of course, with effect from 2012, those will be prospectively applicable. The section 911 has another facet is, no, just go back. First was business connection. Second is property in India. So if any non-resident receives any income through or any property in India, that will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. The property is not defined, but it means something tangible, not confined to immovable property. And the phrase is to be taken literally and simply. Next one is, if there is any income which arises to a non-resident out of asset or source of income in India, then that income will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. This I will explain. There was a company in Australia. It owned a brand called Foster, and it had some kind of a technology for manufacture of beer. That trade name and brand name was given to an Indian company, and even the formula for manufacture of that beer was given to this Indian company. While this agreement was on with the Indian company, the parent Australian company transferred its trade name and the trade secret to some another company abroad. The question that arises is whether any income in respect of that transaction which happened outside India will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. Here, the authority for advance ruling held, since some of the asset, that brand was used in India and subsequently it was cancelled and renewed. Subsequently, the license was cancelled post transfer of the brand abroad. Therefore, the income will be arising in India under 911 because the assets were situated in India and the source of income was situated in India, and therefore the Australian company will be liable to pay tax proportionately on the income which they got by way of transfer of the trade name and the brand. Next, I'll come to this next part of that. There is another, in the next slide, there is an interesting angle to it. Now, this is the one we were talking about Vodafone. What was the Vodafone contention and what was the Vodafone case all about? So there was a company abroad which held the shares of Vodafone India, company in India, Vodafone India. The shares of the company abroad were purchased by another company abroad. The question that arises is whether the gain arising from that capital gain arising from transfer of those shares outside India, it is taxable in India or not. The wording of that section is all income accruing or arising, whether directly or indirectly, through the transfer of capital assets situated in India. So this is one of the words used. So the argument of department was that the underlying asset of the foreign company is your entire Indian business, and therefore the income from the capital gain is taxable in India. The reasoning given by Supreme Court is very interesting. Here, the wording uses whether directly or indirectly. The Supreme Court held that this directly or indirectly qualifies all income accruing or arising. It does not qualify transfer of capital asset. Number two, they said that legitimate tax planning is valid. Number three, they said special purpose vehicles and holding companies and cross-border transactions are normal. They said that corporate veil can be pierced only in exceptional circumstances and not normally. And the transaction should be looked as a whole. So when the foreign company transferred its shares, you cannot break the consideration between what is the value of the shares and what is the component of controlling interest or management right in that. So therefore, the Supreme Court held 195 does not apply to transfer between two non-resident persons. Finance Act 12 brought retrospective amendment to section 2 subsection 14, and capital asset in relation to that includes, in relation to India, includes rights of management and control with the definition of capital asset to nullify that Supreme Court. In section 9, they said that through, the word through the transfer will include by means of and in consequence of and by reasons of. So these three explanations were added to the word through. Thereby, the Finance Act 2012 said that the income in such cases will be taxable in India. There is a spate of litigation. This matter, after Supreme Court went to International Court, and International Court did not give relief to the government of India. Now, in fact, today there is a news item and everybody is circulating that government is now saying that this is prospective. So now this may not apply from 1976 or the earlier one, what they said. Let's hope that how the clarification is worded. We will study that when the clarification is, we get details about the clarification. But what we understand that government did not get any revenue from these foreign share transfer transactions.
Deepak,
Yes.
They are even talking about a refund to be given.
So whatever small amount of tax they must have paid because of certain demands and whatever the coercive action, they may have to give refund.
They are saying that they will pay it without interest.
This was a case which became a very prestige issue for all the government of India also, and I think they have lost at all levels. I remember when originally decision was given, it was given by Justice Kapadia. Originally, Bombay High Court was given in favor of the department, but this was reversed by Supreme Court. Then the government of India, before bringing this amendment, they filed a review petition before bench of Chief Justice Kapadia, and I think he turned down that also with heavy remarks against the government, and talking about extraterritorial jurisdiction. This is very interesting case. I think this might be one of the leading case in the history of the Indian tax legislation. We saw the earlier case of Foster Beer. In this case, this was the Pfizer Corporation. Here, the Indian company cancelled the license, surrendered the technical know-how fee to the foreign company, and subsequently, when the foreign company sold its technical know-how and this thing, all the brand and these intangible assets, then in that case, they said that since the situs of that technical information is not there in India because the agreement has been cancelled before transfer of those rights, the income under that will not be taxable in India. This is again authority for advance ruling. So if you distinguish these two, while the agreement and while all the rights in the Indian business are on, and if it is transferred, the income will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. But if before transfer, if all the rights which are given to the Indian entity are cancelled or surrendered, and subsequent there is a transfer, then there won't be any capital gain in respect of transactions happening outside India. Next. Now we come to section 9(1), subsection 2, salaries payable for services rendered in India. So if any non-resident is paid salary in non-resident suppose there is a technician in USA and he is working in India. He is working in India, but his salary is paid abroad. Then because of 9(1)(2), the salary will be deemed to accrue or arise in India, and it will attract a tax. Now, many times what happens, there is a parent company and there is an Indian subsidiary. If parent company deputes some of his person to Indian company for a period of say 1 year or say for a period of 2 years, and if it pays to that technician and Indian company reimburses its salary to the foreign company, I feel there could be a double taxation. When foreign company pays to an employee, there will be TDS because services are rendered in India under section 9(1)(2). And when Indian company pays to the foreign company, that will be construed as fees for technical services, and it could attract taxation under 9(1)(7). So one has to be very careful about this. Maybe it is advisable to take that foreign person on the direct payroll of the Indian company. Salary for the rest period or leave periods is also taxable. Non-residents working on oil rigs, so the salary is taxable. I would like to elaborate this further because India under section 225A is defined as under Article 1 of the Constitution also. India means territorial waters also. So what it covers is 12 nautical miles from the coast or 22.2 kilometers from the coast. Since the oil rigs are within that distance, therefore it is treated as salary paid in India, and therefore the income is taxable in India. I don't know the rules about definition of India vis-a-vis airspace. I really don't know. Whether anyone knows, I don't know. But generally I read it is 1 lakh square feet or 30,000 meters. So what is definition of India vis-a-vis ground level and vis-a-vis the air level, airspace level. Now, if there is a marine engineer who is working on a foreign going Indian ship, there is this decision of a Bombay High Court says that his salary is, since it accrues outside India, it is not taxable in India. This is very important decision because normally you feel that ship is traveling abroad and therefore he is abroad. But under international law, a ship is considered to be a moving land or a moving earth of a country of which it carries flag. So therefore, if any ship is carrying flag of India, it will be treated as an Indian land, or it's called Indian soil. And therefore, even if it is anywhere in the world, it will be deemed that the income is arising in India. So this decision gives benefit. Otherwise, what will happen if you are working for a company like, say, Shipping Corporation of India, then your salary will become taxable. But if you are working for a company which is based abroad, then it will not be taxable. I remembered having read one very interesting case. There was one Britisher owning a ship which was registered in West Indies. That ship touched Bombay port, and there were disputes between the crew members appointed in Bombay port and the shipping company. The Bombay High Court decided this case in favor of those crew members. The Supreme Court said, no, you don't have authority. Only the court in West Indies will have authority, not even the British court, because the ship is considered to be the moving land of the country of which it carries flag. Fortunately, that decision is not applicable to the Indian Income Tax Act.
Deepakji,
Yes.
That in salary income, this part B, what you discussed, that supposing this foreign company is paying to an employee and the Indian company just giving that reimbursement, still you feel that 917 will apply, is it?
No, this is, I feel we can argue the case, but we are exposed to a litigation. There should not be double taxation. I understand. There should not be double taxation. But if the department takes stand that salary paid by that company to him is in US or in UK, and you are paying to them, these are two separate transactions, and therefore you pay tax on both.
Okay. That's why I said that if at all somebody says about the reimbursement where you are giving all the details, then possibly you may be in a position to escape. But I do not deny that there can be a litigation.
So it is better to take that employee on your payroll only.
Yeah. Okay.
And pay him during his stay in India.
Look, one more thing. With regard to the shipping companies generally have an office in India. Sometimes the recruitment is also done from here. The payments are also done at times by the branch offices in India. But the flag is of the foreign company. Let's say Singapore, Goodwood, or some other large company. In that case, what is the situation?
No. I think when the payment is made in India, there is a CBDT circular which says that if the employees open an NRE account in India and the money is deposited into NRE account, it will not be treated as income received outside India.
Irrespective of whether the payment is made
basically, because again, if it is an Indian company, then it is going against, Yeah. So if you're an employee of a foreign ship and you open account outside India, and it doesn't become taxable. But if you are an employee of an Indian shipping company, it will go against you. So to give relief, they have done this, I think.
Okay.
To Indian shippers.
No. What I'm saying is the principal company is, let's say, in Singapore, and they have an office in India where the recruitment is also done in India. The payment is also done by the Indian subsidiary of that company, which which may be a licensing company or which may be will that still be taxable in India in the hands of the shipping?
If the payment is made by Indian subsidiary, then irrespective of Section 9, yes, Section 9, we can argue out a case that the services are rendered outside India, because then the ship is going up outside India, but Section 5 will come into picture. The salary is received in India.
Okay.
Check CBDT circular that if the salary is paid to NRE account, there is some concession given.
Okay, sir.
Next. have we skipped one? Have we skipped one? No, sorry, 913. In case of a salary which is payable by government to its employees, then the income is taxable in India, irrespective of the residential status of the employee and irrespective of place where the services are rendered. For example, if you are a consulate general of, say, United States, then the salary of that consul general will be taxable in India, even though he is based outside India, even though his services are rendered outside India. However, please go through section 10, subsection 7. Those persons are given certain perquisites and allowances. Those are tax-free under section 10(7). So salary paid by the government is taxable in India, irrespective of the residential status of the person and irrespective of the place where services are rendered. Dividend paid outside India by an Indian company under 916 is taxable. Till last year, the dividend was tax exempt, but from now onwards, the dividend will be taxable. I think section 115A talks about flat rate of tax of 20%. So that you'll have to check. Then 915, interest paid by government, it is taxable. So in this case, what happened was the interest was granted on the income tax refund. And they said that since the non-resident has been in India, you cannot claim benefit of Article 12 of Indo-France Treaty that income will not be taxable. I think I forgot to mention the citation. It is Pride for Foramer SAS 207 87 CCA 007. It is Uttarakhand. Here, my experience tells me that a non-resident, whenever the government issues refund on the interest, they again deduct TDS. So if I am due a refund of 10,000 and I get a refund of 1,000, interest of 1,000 on that 10,000, they deduct 30%. So that 300 again they deduct. So next year probably I'll get 300 refund. They will deduct 90 on that. So this becomes like a multiplier effect. In case of a resident, if the interest is paid, then if the interest is paid outside India, where the money is borrowed outside India and used for the purpose of business outside India or for the purpose of income earning outside India, then that will not be deemed to accrue or arise in India. But if a resident borrows some money from abroad and it is used in business in India, then interest on that will be deemed to accrue or arise in India. In case of an interest paid by non-resident, will be deemed to accrue or arise in India if that money is borrowed and used for the purpose of business in India. This principle will apply for all subsequent, that is for royalty as well as for fees for technical services also. Next. Anybody has questions on this?
Deepak.
Yes, sorry.
As far as this dividend is concerned, you happen to mention about the rate under 115A to be 20%.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, suppose the DTAA rate is something which is lower, that is at 10%.
Yes. Then you will get a lower. Then you can pay lower. But
but
for that purpose, you should have the tax residency certificate for that country. Yeah.
So I am on a different point that really speaking, then it says that if I'm not making mistake under 115A subsection 5, that if at all the tax deducted is not at 20%, then in that case you need to file the return in India.
Correct.
How do you reconcile this situation that really speaking, the Act itself says that between tax rate under the Act and the DTAA, whatever is beneficial to the assessee, he should take. Now, again, he has to go and file the return. Don't you think that it is really speaking quite harmful from that perspective?
No. See, here only additional requirement will be to file the return. See, if you deduct under the 115A, that particular section says that if it is 20% and you pay that, then you need not file the return because that's the amount of tax. But if you are deducting at a lower rate, probably government wants to check whether that benefit which you have taken under DTA is correct or not.
But as it is, when I am remitting the dividend, I am submitting myself to the government through 15 CB, 15C.
So they have to. It's a compliance issue. I appreciate that it's a compliance issue.
Yeah. Oh.
Now we come to section 916, royalty payable. So royalty, as I explained earlier, in case of interest, if royalty is payable by government, then TDS is automatically applicable. If the royalty is payable by resident, except where the intellectual property is used in business outside India or for income earning outside India. So for example, if you have imported a technical know-how and you are paying, say, royalty at, say, certain percentage, say 2% on your turnover. If your turnover is in relation to exports and you pay royalty, then probably the royalty in respect of exports will not be deemed to accrue or arise in India. But if the royalty is in relation to a turnover which is happening in India, then in that event, that royalty will be deemed to accrue or arise in India, and then TDS will be applicable. Non-residents, where in case of a royalty payable by a non-resident, will be deemed to accrue or arise in India if it is used for the purpose of business in India. Now, this decision of authority for advance ruling is very interesting. There is a company A in USA. There is company B in USA. A has, say, for example, a subsidiary company in India, say S. Now, A is making payment to B for grant of license by B to Indian subsidiary in which the A has a controlling interest. Then royalty paid by A to B, even though it is paid outside India, the situs is in India, and therefore authority for advance ruling held that it will be taxable in India under 917C and even under Article 12 of DTA, because they will have, that subsidiary will be treated as a PE of the Indian company. Here also, in this case, Goa Carbon Limited case, the payment was made to a foreign company under agreement for transfer of technology. So there was an outright purchase of transfer of technology, and the foreign company did not render any service except 2 of its employees were deputed to India for 15 days to start that machinery. Then it was held that it was for consideration for transfer of technology and therefore taxable as royalty under section at 20%. Next, I'll cover royalty fully. Next, royalty is a big chapter, and the latest decision I want to discuss. Now, Supreme Court in Tata Consultancy said that software made as per customer's requirement, what is like we call it as a tailor-made, it is in the form of books, and therefore it is like goods attracting sales tax. Therefore, there cannot be classified as royalty. We will come to this in a later decision, which is a very detailed decision, and in the subsequent slide it will come. The second one was CGI Information Systems Management Consultants, where the parent company, there is parent company in Canada, there is a subsidiary in India. Parent company acquired certain software from, say, Microsoft and paid money there. The Indian company reimbursed part of its cost to the parent company. See, if Indian company had made payment directly to Microsoft, it would have become a royalty and it would have attracted TDS. So merely if you route that payment through the parent company, it will not go outside the purview of royalty by calling it as reimbursement of expenses. So whenever there is any reimbursement of expenses, you'll have to see whether if I had made that payment directly to that supplier rather than routing it through my sister concern or associated concern or a parent company, if it had attracted TDS, this would also attract TDS. And therefore, explanation 4 has been inserted by Finance Act 2012 to cover these kind of situations. This is a very good decision of Karnataka High Court in Samsung Electronics. So what they have said, that amount paid to the supplier for the supply of what we call shrink wrapped software is combination of 3 items. One, is the price of the CD. Earlier it used to be on CD. 2, the software which is included, which is there on that CD. And 3rd is price of the license. So there are certain softwares which you can there are certain CDs which you can run directly. For example, ebooks or music, you can directly put to use on purchase. Whereas there are certain CDs where you are required to download that data which is stored, or you are required to access, and you are required to have kind of a key to access that software or to download it on your hard disk. Then in that event, that amount which is given to download that software or pay for the license would be treated as a royalty. So software is bifurcated into 3 parts. Price of CD would be probably treated as a goods, and the other 2 would be treated as royalty. Next. There are kind of instruments. For example, I was told that this uninterruptible power supply, it has its own software. That software is useless vis-a-vis without that machine. So that software which is embedded in the equipment cannot be used independently. Therefore, in such cases, when that software is part of that equipment, you cannot specifically call it as a royalty. Similarly, if there is a company in India, it is accessing a platform which is a designated server platform in USA, and for using that platform, Indian company is paying to a US company, then it will be treated as a royalty, and Article 12 of Indo-US Treaty also will apply. Similarly, if you take a ship on time charter basis, that a certain number of days, and you take that ship on rental, then it will be treated as royalty for use of equipment. Finance Bill 2012 has retrospectively made certain amendments. Explanation 4, payment for right to use of software is royalty, and consideration in respect of any right to the property or information, whether the payer has possession or whether such right is located outside India, is also covered by explanation 5. This is to overcome the decision of that Delhi High Court, which we discussed about the programs being uplinked on the satellite outside India. Next. Now, this is the very important decision which Anil also last time discussed. See, there are certain softwares which are, for example, Tally. There is a trader in Tally, so he buys Tally and sells Tally. Then what is the status of that? So Supreme Court in this decision is very important. This has been given in March 2021 by Justice Rohinton Nariman. Very well analyzed decision. So he has analyzed section 14B2 of the Copyright Act. It says this 14B interdicts, he has used the word interdict, that is, it prevents reproduction of computer program, that you cannot make copies of that software. Therefore, distribution of copyrighted computer software does not grant license. So when I buy, for example, Tally software from, suppose I import from abroad and I sell it as it is, I am not granting any license in respect of that, or I'm not giving any interest in that software. So this is called a copyrighted article or copyrighted computer software, and it does not grant any interest in that software. Therefore, no TDS is required. This is a very important decision. Definition of royalty has to be seen under double tax avoidance agreement on the basis of Article 12 of OECD commentary, because in all the double tax avoidance agreements, the definition of the royalty is on the basis of Article 12 of the OECD commentary. Therefore, Supreme Court has held that that definition will have more persuasive value as far as interpreting the provisions of the term royalty in all double tax avoidance agreements. Next.
Sir.
Let us complete this and then we'll talk.
Okay.
This decision, there is another part. The next slide is on that, and then we will talk. After this slide, we will talk. Royalty and supplier or use of software in the form of goods when taxable as business income. So there is a general knowledge, it is generally known that when you import goods, then that represents business income. And if it is taxable only if that entity has a P in India. Therefore, this also says that when you are buying a shrink wrapped software, it is a goods and the income will not be taxed unless that company has a P in India. Article 12 of double tax avoidance agreement, which we saw definition of royalty under OECD model, is more favorable than explanations 2 and 4 of section 916. Therefore, these sections will have no application. And amounts paid by residents, either I am using on my own or I am a distributor and I import that software and sell as it is without any value addition to the Indian customers, it will not be treated as a royalty and no TDS is required. This is a decision of Engineering Analysis Center of Excellence Private Limited. See, this is a very big decision. I have tried to highlight the bullet points. I request all of you to read that decision in greater details for interpretation of this section 916. Yeah, now you go ahead.
My question was, you said if Tally is sold, then we will not deduct the TDS. Now, what happens now? Now, the Plutronics, who is the makers of Tally, and they are allowing the license to use to so many people. So, how is the TDS being covered? This is my question.
No. We are talking about first import, right? We are talking about first import. Suppose Plutronics was based out of India. Say it was based in UK, and you import it, and correct. Here you are not given any license. You are just allowed to operate that. You are allowed to operate that software, Tally software. You are not doing any value addition. You are not allowed to pass on anything out of that. You are just using it for your own business. Then in that event, it is treated as goods, and therefore TDS will not apply. I think this decision will require independent session because this is a big decision. I have tried to highlight about 7-8 points out of that.
No, but all throughout this website creation or software use, we were always under the impression that TDS would have to be deducted on this.
No, so here that's what I'm saying. They have gone into details of that Copyright Act. They have gone into details of double tax avoidance agreement. They have gone into details of OECD model. And after considering all this, they have definitely given a very good decision. And I feel it is a well-reasoned decision. It's a very good decision. Probably going to amend section 9.1 after this.
Deepak, what happens in connection with the software which is being imported by the distributor in India and then he distributes it? There is a circular which says
yes. Original circular said that if you deducted at first instance, subsequent need not deduct, right? I think that is the circular.
Yeah, so suppose you are a distributor, you first deducted, then in that particular case, I need not deduct from you.
Correct. But here, if on the first instance, because of this decision, if you don't deduct, then you'll have to check under our local law whether it will be treated as a fees for technical services.
Yeah.
Okay, but what will be the situation now in connection with this particular type of a software? They are out of this, is it?
Yes, but if I take this logic that under that patent law, under that that law which he has mentioned, that I'm not allowed to do pass it on to anyone, anything.
Okay.
The rights in which event, then it is a good. No? Then it is treated as a good.
Yeah, but there are so many things which end up at my point. Otherwise,
you are simply working on the software. You are not doing any value addition. No? You are not changing anything.
No, sir. It is inconceivable. No? I'm sorry. Where I'm coming up is that there are so many services which would end up in your place without there being a further transfer or without a value addition per se carried out with that aspect, and then passed on to others. There are so many items which would stop at our end. So
no, are you talking about royalty or you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about.
No. If you're talking about fees for technical services, we will come to that later, because there are decisions which have held that if those services are utilized in a business in India, then the TDS is applicable. Then there is no question of value addition, or there is no question of passing on of services. But software is something which is always traded, or sometimes it is utilized in my own business. So royalty definition of OECD model is very important for analyzing double tax avoidance agreement, and that section which I mentioned there, that section is important for determining the terms and conditions in India.
No, this decision applies.
This is in line with that decision in Tata case. So these decisions go parallel.
So these decisions, Deepak, will apply for all types of software, whether it is a system software, application software, whatever software. Like if I am purchasing a Microsoft, then it will apply. Then in that particular case, it will apply for even Tally software, everything. Is it?
Yes. I think we should study this decision more in detail.
True.
I have tried to cover the basic logic. See, this is about, I think it is 200-page decision. So to cover everything in such a short span, it's a Herculean task. That's why I was borrowing time from Sagar, that this decision to cover takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Right.
This is a big decision, and I think Rohinton Nariman has done a very good job, fantastic job. It's not easy
to software, or restricted, or it is a broad scope of royalty.
It is in relation to royalty. It is in relation to royalty. He has covered a lot of, because there are a bunch of applicants. So this is not only one case, there are a number of cases bunched together.
Okay, so Deepak, go ahead.
I think here the Deepak, what they have done is actually they have just collected certain bunch of people and they have given this decision in respect of these people, no? Or
but all stalwarts are there. If you look at those people who argued, all are stalwarts. Big, n number of applicants, I have tried to analyze in my own way, but if somebody can analyze still further and still go into the details, we would certainly appreciate that.
Great. So there are certain decisions, even today's the bill with reference to the earlier decisions is also something which is worth discussing. At some or the other point of time. Of course, it has no prospective value. It is applicable to those specific cases which had happened prior to 2012.
Correct.
So in that sense, it's not useful for future planning, but nevertheless, from academic point of view, they were important.
And maybe that logic which is used here, as and when the technology changes, that logic which you apply here will be applicable to the new technology also, no?
Correct. And does that mean that does that mean that the retrospective amendments which they had made earlier are going to end in future, because now they have made it once and they have to retrieve, and now whatever.
It was, retrospective also it was made they went backdated too much. It wasn't a small 1 year backdating is different, and here they went back to
61, I think. 61.
76 or to 61 also.
61, I think.
61. So 61 to 2012. So almost 50 years.
Okay. So that's great. Sir, you have completed royalty from your side?
Just see below. I think it goes to fees for technical services.
Yeah. Actually, it goes to fees for technical services.
What is the time now?
We have exceeded our time. But anyway, that was not a problem.
Then what we can do is that this and balance 195 and all we'll cover next time.
Absolutely. We'll do that. So last time, actually we missed Ganesh Shanbhag. I had suggested that he should propose a vote of thanks or cover of the things. And if it is he is there today, I would request him, because he has participated today also. Ganesh, you are there?
Yeah, I'm there.
So if you can sum up very briefly, and maybe whatever you felt about this kind of meetings, because you have attended for the probably second time only.
And has attended earlier also.
Okay, great.
You missed me. Sorry.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So just try to sum up if it is possible.
Yeah. And I always feel that if there is something subjective, then that is God. That subject of God keeps on becoming subjective so much that it is endless. Like that, this section 9, which is there, it is so subjective and so interpretive in its own way. And the way the slides and are so created and so crisp and with punchlines and bullet lines, it really brings about a lot of clarity. And I really thank Deepak sir for taking all the effort to do this. Thank you, sir.
I know it is a very complicated and difficult section, but I have tried to simplify. I don't know how far the purpose was achieved.
No, fully achieved. Thank you very much.
It was a great session, Deepakji. Very great. Very good, in fact. I think everybody is awake till 11:20 without any...
In fact, the fact that you propose to postpone it further for another session, it actually allows us more time to think on several issues. And not only that, at the fag end, probably would not be able to concentrate so much. So the next session would be much more pressure and it will be much interesting.
Yeah, and in the beginning of the next session, you are also allowed to ask the questions which are related to our last session also. It's not that that is once it is gone, it is gone. So in the beginning, maybe, if you have missed out asking some questions, some time will be allotted for that.
Yes.
And at our 15 minutes trend will also continue. So please write to me if you want to present your live case in the beginning of the next session. Thanks a lot.